Saints Row raises crucial questions about the nature of gang warfare throughout American history. The game is essentially a gang simulator, where main characters establish their own gang called the Saints for largely economic and political reasons. They find themselves unemployed and targeted by existing gang violence, so that they establish their own gang as the best way they can think of to survive. Some historians argue that this is exactly how gangs operated in the 1960s, providing economic and political opportunities to marginalized communities in America, while other historians completely disagree, arguing that gangs fractured and damaged marginalized communities by inundating them with drug, prostitution, and gambling rings. So in this video, I'm going to explore arguments on both sides, seeing if we can determine once and for all if Saints Row's representation of gangs as purveyors of economic and political opportunities is really historically accurate. I'm Dr. Darren Reid, and this is History Through Games. Thank you for tuning in. I'm a historian at McGill University, and this is a video series where I use video games to explore historical debates, concepts, and themes. I want this channel to be a collaboration with you. I don't want to just lecture at you about what I'm interested in. I want to shape the series around your interests. So please let me know in the comments if there's any historical themes that you think I could explore through a video game lens, or if there's any video games that you're curious to know the historical elements to. So leave me those comments below and I will get back to them just as soon as I can. Today I'm analyzing two opposing peer-reviewed publications about the history of gangs in 1960s America, both focusing on African American gangs in Chicago, like the Egyptian Cobras and the Vice Lords. The first publication by Andrew Diamond argues that we need to approach these gangs like grassroots community organizations, which pursued civil rights and black power ideals to benefit and improve their communities. The second publication by Will Cooley argues that while some gang members might have had lofty civil rights ideas at heart, overall, gangs were primarily concerned with establishing control over the underground economy, meaning prostitution, gambling, extortion, and the drug trade, and were therefore actively undermining the strength, cohesion, and resilience of their communities. So I'll be analyzing the strengths and weaknesses of both of their arguments and what evidence they have, but first, for those who have never played Saints Row, here's a super quick summary. Released in 2022 as a reboot of a classic game franchise, Saints Row is overall a comedy game that uses over-the-top story elements to make light of what is in reality a very serious topic, that of gang life and gang warfare. Throughout the game, players complete missions like fighting their way through a Hunger Games style Gladiator Island, or crushing rival gangs in giant monster trucks in order to obtain more territory and more recruits for their up-and-coming gang. At the end of the game, players successfully establish control over the entire city, modeled loosely on Las Vegas, and therefore bring peace to what was a city plagued by inter-gang warfare. This narrative within Saints Row of a gang bringing peace to its community is at the heart of a debate over the role played by gangs in American history. According to historians like Andrew Diamond, the narrative within Saints Row is more or less accurate because he argues that gangs in the 1960s provided African American youth ways to channel their anger and their anxiety into developing economic and political empowerment. For example, Diamond points to the murder of a black teenager in a white community in Chicago in 1961. That black teenager did not belong to any gang, but two rival gangs, the Egyptian Cobras and the Vice Lords, came together and gathered around 500 black youth to protest and conduct reprisal attacks against the white community members. Diamond uses this as evidence that gangs provided a structure and a community to bring the community together to resist racial oppression, in this case, police brutality against black children. Will Cooley disagrees entirely. While Cooley acknowledges that some gangs did pursue civil rights agendas, he argues that they only did so when it supported their criminal enterprises. For example, Cooley argues that when a gang called the Blackstone Rangers worked to protect black business owners in their community, it only did so not out of any interest for black business owners, but because they were profiting from extorting those very same businesses. And so they were following a civil rights mandate for the protection of their own racketeering revenue. Cooley also points out that the Blackstone Rangers gang, although working alongside some civil rights leaders at some points in their history, at other points in their history tried to assassinate those very same leaders, demonstrating that when the Blackstone Rangers and gangs in general worked alongside civil rights leaders, they did so not for the betterment of their community, but for the protection of their own criminal interests. Now, both of these historians criticize and find major flaws in each other's work. Andrew Diamond argues that Will Cooley bases his arguments on flawed and biased sources. Whereas Diamond relies on Chicago police surveillance records, Cooley relies on newspaper articles, which Diamond argues are sensationalized and fail to capture the political mobilizing activities that are revealed in police surveillance records. Conversely, Will Cooley argues that Andrew Diamond thinks too simply about the purpose of political organizing conducted by gangs. Cooley argues that political organizing can have ulterior motives around controlling a community that are unconnected with grander, more philanthropic, civil rights, and black power ideals. As is usually the case when there's a debate between two opposing sides, reality is probably somewhere in the middle, with some gangs pursuing some level of civil rights and black power mobilizing, and some gangs using black power and civil rights rhetoric to support their own criminal activity. But for me, the more important question is that of the context behind gang activity in the first place. Gangs in 1960s Chicago could only benefit or exploit their communities if their communities were already suffering from significant racial oppression in the first place, just as players in Saints Row can only establish peace in their city if the city was already suffering from inter-gang warfare. So perhaps rather than continuing to debate whether gangs historically were beneficial or exploitative of their communities, we should instead focus on understanding the racial oppression contexts which required gangs to arise in the first place. But I want to know what you think. If you've played Saints Row, what did you think about the representation of gangs and gang warfare? And if you've never played Saints Row, what do you think about this topic in general? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and like I said earlier, leave any suggestions for future games to play or future videos to do so that I can shape the future of this channel around what you're interested in. And if you liked this video, feel free to check out my growing catalog of videos on other video games from Doom and Diablo to Wolfenstein and Zelda. Or keep your eye on this channel where I try to update it every Monday or every second. But that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Farewell!